Babysitters, what is the worst or awkward situation you've encountered while babysitting? Mom and dad came home drunk and fighting. The dad went out to walk the dog, and the mom locked the door with me inside. She kept saying "shusher" while the dad screamed from the outside. She started saying things like, "He wants to kill himself instead of be with me, who says that?" I reached for the lock to get out, and she pulled my hand back saying, "No, leave him for a while." I waited as long as I could, then busted out of there. New Year's Eve. Parents come home midway through the evening to drop off one of their super drunk friends. He went to sleep in the 3-year-old's bed and the kid kept going up to check on him like a little nurse. One of the kids reached for a glass of what I thought was water on the coffee table, but I quick gave it a sniff and it was vodka that the parents left out when they went to the bars. Parents were so drunk they each tipped me a ton of money and told me not to tell the other party. I made $90 that night, which was amazing money in 1993. I was babysitting my boss daughter, who was 4 years old and constipated. The kiddo went to the bathroom and remained there for like 15 minutes, so I went in to find her after she did not come out. She was on the toilet, straining, of course. And I was about to leave her in privacy when she went and flailed her little arms and said the phrase that will live in my memory forever. "You can't leave. You have to squish me." I had quite the WTF expression, I'm sure. So I went, "What?" And she says, "When I can't poop, mommy and daddy always squish my tummy, so you have to squish me." And she places one hand on her stomach and one hand on her back and demonstrates how to squish her. So I accept her demands and gingerly put a bit of pressure on her stomach. But, oh, no. Harder. You have to squish me harder. So, I'm literally squishing the shit out of a small child for a few minutes until finally she breathes a sigh of relief and tells me she's done. She hops up off the toilet and there, in the bowl, is this tiny corncanal-sized turd. I squished a baby for almost ducking nothing. While I was in college, a girl I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years called me out of the blue and asked me to babysit for a child that she had babysat before. She just gave me an address and told me to go there. I couldn't believe it. I was not really the babysitting type, and the girl had quit hanging out with my friend and I because we partied way too much. I told her I would do it even though I had to be there in 10 minutes. I get there, and the lady is waiting on the front porch. She is all impatient and the like and tells me the baby is asleep and probably won't wake up, then she takes off. I was kind of shocked. I didn't even know her name or the kid's name or even if the kid was a boy or girl or how old it was. I went in the house and found the kid's room. The infant, couldn't have been more than 3 to 4 months old, was asleep in the crib, so I checked on it and went downstairs and watched some TV. She said she would be back in about an hour, but 3 hours later, she still hadn't shown up or called, and the baby finally woke up, and I assumed was hungry. I changed his diaper. This was when I found out he was a boy, and took him downstairs to find something to feed him. I wasn't sure what to give him and there were no instructions. I couldn't get a hold of the girl, so I called my mom. She told me to just give him some formula. I wanted to, but there were 3 different kinds, so I picked the one for sensitive stomachs, made it and fed him. He calmed down, and I held him on the couch playing with him for another 2 hours, until the parents finally showed up. The mom walked and handed me a $20 and told me I could go, so I did. I never did learn anyone's name and found it really weird that they would entrust their infant with some random chick, but I guess that time they got lucky. I babysat 2 girls, maybe 8 and 6. Their mom said she was planning on being home around supper time. Well, supper time comes and goes and mom doesn't show. A few more hours and I receive a drunk phone call from mommy dearest. I asked her when she expected to be home and she said she didn't know. She asked to talk to her oldest and I put the little girl on the phone. Kid gets upset and runs to the kitchen, grabs a large knife and runs out into the night. I panic but managed to find her. She was hiding in the yard, didn't get too far. Anyway, long story short, it's now the next day and I call a friend of mine to take over since I was exhausted. Mom shows up 3 days later and gives my friend $20 to give to me. I'm furious and vow to never sit for anyone again. A few weeks go by and her boyfriend shows up and apologizes for her actions and hands me $150. That family moved soon after that. Being 6 years old and barely being able to take care of myself, let alone an infant. I came up pretty poor and my mom struggled to make ends meet. One day she had an interview and had to leave us, me and my brother who was 4, alone for 6 hours or so while she left to go to a job interview. Not to mention we were living out of a small motel room. Anyway, I could handle my brother, so that wasn't too bad, but about 30 minutes later this junkie lady, who lived next door to us, knocked on the door calling for help. Since I knew her and saw she was in trouble, I opened up the door. She then convinced me to babysit her 3-month-old infant while she did God knows what and shit. I was 6, what was I going to say? No. The worst part was her leaving me nothing but some half-eaten Chinese food to feed the kid for the day. Hours later, my mom returned home and cursed me out for opening the door and taking the baby, though she knew that I was only trying to be nice. The junkie lady returned late that night and my mom went batshit crazy on her. I never found out what happened to them, being that my mom got the job and we moved to an apartment soon after, but I hope that child ended up okay. I still think about it to this day. I once babysat a friend's son. I forget how old he was, but it was potty training time and the kid was seriously anal retentive. He simply refused to go number 2 without the aid of a diaper. So this one time I'm at my friend's house with the kid, and it's becoming obvious that he needs to go. I start to ask, do you need to go to the bathroom, and do you need to go poo-poo? But the kid continuously shouted no. Finally he starts to flip his shit, as he realizes that he can't hold it any longer. He starts running around the house with his hand covering his ass. Did I mention his not wearing pants or undies at this point, trying to hold it in, screaming, while I'm chasing after him trying to urge him to sit on the toilet. Finally it happens. He stops running in the kitchen, looks up at me, and then, bam, lets out a huge log of shit right onto the kitchen floor. Without saying a word, he steps back and begins to stare at this monster shit that he has released, unclear or that such a thing could have come from his ass. Then he tries to touch it. I managed to get him away and clean it up before things got any worse. I used to babysit for a family who had a child with cancer. The siblings, being very young, at points could not understand the urgency of certain situations. Once we were at the community pool and I received a phone call saying that we needed to leave immediately to see the sick child in the hospital, which is obviously worrisome, and several of the kids refused to get out of the pool. Even when I pointed out that we needed to go see their sister, which usually they get very excited about, they started freaking out. When I finally got down to one kid who would not listen, he glued himself to the ground screaming that she should just die already so he could continue swimming. The other siblings frantically tried to get him off the ground and people were now staring. Being a community pool, everyone knew the family and knew there wasn't much I could do. He was just so hurt. It was a scene. It was heartbreaking to say the least. The kids were not very well behaved, but there is so much love for this little girl in the family. It takes such a toll on them to deal with her illness. When I was a preschool teacher, we would do lunchtime followed by nap time. The room was quiet and I was cleaning up. I was at the sink washing my hands when I looked over at one of the boys. He was sleeping on his back. He had vomited and was basically suffocating on his own puke. I don't know how long he had been like that, but not too long, thank goodness. I rolled him over and started cleaning puke out of his mouth and nose. He coughed and started breathing. I started bawling. I got him cleaned up and held him until his dad got there. Unfortunately, I have too many gross stories about kids. I was also a nanny to 5 kids. They are disgusting creatures. I had just started a shift with a new family. There was a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old. The 7-year-old wanted a story and came to sit in my knee. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then I realized the boy was subtly trying to feel my breasts. This kept happening and I felt so awkward. I kept moving my hands away and he kept trying to find ways to feel them. Eventually he just squeezed my breasts. I have made it clear now that it is not acceptable, but sometimes he will just come to talk to me and try and stroke my breasts. It's pretty weird. I've babysat for 2 separate families where the older brother absolutely hated the younger brother. The first family I watched while I was just 14, and I couldn't physically pull apart 2 boys from a fight. The younger one almost fell down the stairs once. The other family just about broke my heart. It hurt to hear a 2-year-old say to me, "Brian doesn't love me," with complete awareness that his older brother disliked him so much. I accidentally ate a stash of wheat cookies when I was 12. In retrospect, it makes more sense now that they kept the cookies in the back of the cupboard above the refrigerator. I had to get up on the counter to reach them. I initially only planned on stealing 1 cookie, but I just couldn't help going back for more again and again. I was filling in for my cousin's usual gig. She was 16, she flipped when she showed up and found me all stoned. I once babysat a kid who had really bad eczema. They had a pool in their backyard, and after he would go swimming his skin would get really dry and scaly. I think it was really itchy too because he would scratch all the time, which lead to really gross pussy blisters. His parents had a bunch of other kids, so his skin went kinda untreated and he always had a weird smell about him. A smell I can only attribute to dead, decaying skin. One day, after swimming, I couldn't find him. I started crawling on the floor looking for him. Finally I spotted him way underneath his bed, where I couldn't reach him. He was just chilling under there, eating his skin. It was repulsive. He was staring me dead in the eyes, gnoming on decaying pus-coated blisters. I couldn't even reach him to make him stop. It was gross. I watched these kids for an entire summer and made $8 per day. Not worth it.